Big news this week related to Roger Stone, who was finally sentenced this week by Judge Amy Berman Jackson, who is an Obama appointee here in the District Court for the District of Columbia. The courthouse is just down the street there from Judicial Watch. And he was sentenced to just under 4 years, 3 years and change, about 40 months, which further confirms that the Mueller operatives who were trying to abuse the process by pushing for a recommendation of 7 to 9 years were wrong, and that Attorney General Barr was right to intervene. He probably should have intervened more severely and strongly. And the president himself was right that it was a miscarriage of justice that he would go away for 7 to 9 years. So the judge had her hearing, and it was full. She's no friend of President Trump, it's pretty clear. And it was full of political statements and drama about how terrible a person Roger Stone was. But the fact is, one of the charges, the charge on witness tampering, probably should never have been brought, because you have the Justice Department suggesting that the victim of the witness tampering didn't think it was serious, but somehow, and therefore it really shouldn't count too much against Stone in terms of any potential sentence beyond the base sentence he would get. But if that were the case, why was the charge brought at all if it wasn't serious? It shows you there's two concepts of justice in this town. You target Trump and his allies, and you protect those who are trying to take him out, or those perceived as on the right side of history in terms of opposing President Trump. And I'm thinking of James Comey and Andrew McCabe most specifically and most recently. So you had this over-the-top, throw-the-book approach at Roger Stone and allies of President Trump. But as I've been saying, people like Andrew McCabe, who lied both under oath and not under oath to federal investigators in the FBI, I think all of which would be criminal, the Justice Department has refused to prosecute. So in many ways, the sentencing of Roger Stone was just in the sense that it was less than the Mueller operatives behind the initial recommendation of 7 to 9 years wanted. The judge rejected that. The judge rejected it. It's not just President Trump who thought it was too much. It wasn't just Attorney General Barr who thought it was too much, but the Obama-appointed judge thought it was too much as well. But despite that, the judge had to make political statements. At one point she said, and I took note of, that he was not being, Roger Stone was not being prosecuted or targeted because he stood up for the president, but because he covered up for the president. You know, that's just frankly a political statement. And it wrongly suggests that the president was involved somehow in this, when in fact there's no evidence of that at all. So if I were the president, I would take a look at this, and I would see, because he's the president, he's supposed to take a broader look at the justice system. He's responsible for the full operations of the Justice Department. We're the ones who vote for him to do the work. We don't vote for bureaucrats in the Justice Department. And it's up to the president to take a look to see how all of these investigations have been handled, and figure out if people's confidence in the fair administration of justice has been hampered and undermined. And if it has been, how is it he fixes it? And I would suggest one way to fix it, besides making sure that the Justice Department finally does its job and prosecutes the in-your-face criminality behind the illicit targeting of him, that he also balances these issues by pardoning or commuting the sentences of individuals who are already convicted who were caught up in Mueller's web or the subsequent DOJ investigations that began largely under Mueller. Many of these people would never have been prosecuted but for the relationship to President Trump, given the other misconduct that's been documented by not only the Justice Department, within the Justice Department and the FBI, but also the compromised and biased Mueller operation. I wouldn't trust anything Mueller's done. If I were the Attorney General, I know he's brought in outsiders to look at the Flynn prosecution. I'm not even sure what they're doing there. Outsiders, in a sense, he assigned a U.S. attorney reportedly to investigate some of the concerns about how Flynn's case was handled. He should be doing that more broadly. Everything Mueller did should be audited by the Attorney General of the United States. And rather than complaining about the president's tweets, he should be focused on the corruption within his own Justice Department. And I think it's interesting this week that the president tweeted yours truly and Judicial Watch out, I think 11 times in one day. And he was tweeting out our update, he was tweeting out my Judicial Watch appearances on Lou Dobbs, where I was talking about the need to clean house at the Justice Department. And of course the media went into a tizzy over this because, you know, I guess Attorney General Barr had said the president shouldn't be tweeting anymore. Well, the president obviously disagrees, and he feels the need to educate the American people about the corruption issues at the Justice Department and the miscarriages of justice, certainly as directed at Roger Stone. You know, I was talking to some folks about this, and someone suggested maybe the president should say to the Justice Department, you know what, I'll stop tweeting when you start prosecuting. That might be a good compromise. But the idea that the president can't be making public comments about in-your-face corruption at the Justice Department it just blows the mind. And I'm glad to see the president also tweeted out instances that I highlighted in my tweets of prior presidents exercising their constitutional prerogatives over the Justice Department. The president runs the Justice Department. He's responsible for it. I understand the Attorney General runs it on a day-to-day basis, but he reports to the president. And I see the New York Times today had an op-ed piece from a leftist pushing now for independence of the Justice Department, which would be a constitutional abomination because the left, and it just lifts the veil. They don't want the Justice Department, run by them, Democrat left-wing partisans, to be answerable to anyone. Certainly not anyone elected by the people of the United States. They want to be able to spy on a candidate. They want to be able to intimidate witnesses and people caught up and close to the candidate to get them to turn by threatening their families. They want to be able to leak classified information to upend a presidency or affect an election. They want to be able to pay people to spy on a presidential campaign without basis, simply because they want to protect the candidate of their choice. They don't want accountability. That's the way they've been operating. And so when you see the New York Times publish an op-ed suggesting the Justice Department be independent, that's been their attitude all along, and it's unconstitutional and anti-Republican in the small r sense of the word. We have a republic based on the rule of law, but it's a constitutional republic in the sense that the American people, in the end, run the show, not the deep state bureaucrats. So, sure enough, as I was saying at the beginning, we've got the Justice Department, and in my view, the way this whole Stone case was handled was designed to be a slap at the president. It was designed to show, give those who support Mueller's sham investigation, abusive investigation, oh, he got another conviction. And a slap at the president after he's acquitted at trial in the impeachment farce. And again, I don't understand why Attorney General Barr is focusing on the president's tweets as opposed to the fact he had 4 prosecutors, according to reports, try to extort actually successfully extort the initial recommendation, the initial approval of the recommendation for 7 to 9 years. What did they do? They said, you push this in. They told their acting boss at the time, you push this in or otherwise we're going to pull out and make a mess of it. Well, he caved. I think that's more concerning. Now this week, to show you that it's all a distraction, this week we have further documentation that the deep state is continuing to misuse our intelligence agencies to try to destroy President Trump, obviously in alliance with their friends in Congress, namely Adam Schiff. There were reports that there was some type of briefing to top leaders of Congress that included Schiff on intelligence matters, saying the Russians wanted to help Trump. Now, there have been variations as to what actually was said and what the intelligence actually shows, and I'm not going to give it the time of day because I don't think any of it is believable. And as I warned you, it's not just about President Trump, it's about anyone that the establishment doesn't want to be in power, and that person particularly is Bernie Sanders. They're horrified that this anti-establishment, and I don't think much of Sanders' policy proposals, they're a little too communist for my taste. So rather than play by the rules and just defeat him at the polls, we get a leak, just as I'm going to air today. There's a leak that the Russians also want to help Bernie Sanders. So how does that work? The Russians want to help President Trump and President Trump's opponent. What is the theory? The theme here is, let's leak classified information to try to undermine candidates for public office. And specifically President Trump, and of course, even Bernie Sanders is being targeted. On behalf of whom, I don't know. Joe Biden, that would explain a lot given the criminal corruption to try to protect him from the consequences of the Ukraine scandal he and his son were embroiled in. Trump is still being targeted. That's for sure. And the left is going in an uproar because he appointed as acting director Richard Grenell, the ambassador to Germany, as acting director of the Office of National Intelligence, which has been a deep state bastion for some time. And his deputy supposedly is going to be Kash Patel. Now, Mr. Patel had helped Devin Nunes on the Intelligence Committee expose the FISA-gate criminality targeting Trump and other abuses targeting him and other Americans. Remember the unmaskings, which we still don't have information on. So they're very frightened that they might have an effective leader, even in an acting capacity, and someone who knows how corrupt the intelligence agencies are, running the Office of Director of National Intelligence, even for a period of time. The more the media scream about particular issues, the more particular approaches that President Trump takes, that's a pretty good indication he's doing the right thing. For instance, when he tweeted me out, when he tweeted Judicial Watch out, they went crazy. NBC News was putting my tweets on the front page on their national news program. Washington Post, New York Times, saying the president is ignoring Barr's demands that he stop tweeting. And what I loved about it is, and the president I think is smart about this, is he's educating Americans when he retweets Judicial Watch and me. Because our tweets are educational. They tell people about issues that they otherwise may not know about. Of course the deep state gets upset when the president tweets something. For instance, I said Barr needs to clean house at the DOJ. Well, who would object to that other than the corrupt deep staters that are running it now? Isn't it fantastic the president tweeted it? And isn't it fantastic that the media got so outraged about it that they actually reported it out further? They don't even know what they're doing. In trying to controversialize the president educating Americans about government corruption, they back themselves into actually educating more Americans about government corruption. So that was great. It was great that the president tweeted out our material this week. because it allows so many more Americans to find out about the essential work we do, which is as important as anything else going on in Washington, D.C. So the coup continues. You've got Adam Schiff involved, it looks like, in Russia leaks, targeting Trump again. Nothing's changed. Even Bernie Sanders is now being targeted for the deep state because he's too extreme for them with illegal leaks, it looks like. You have the Justice Department and the federal judiciary screaming about President Trump. What was really outrageous this week, you had I forget the name of the organizations, let's say it's an association of federal judges. So it's not a government operation, it's a voluntary association of federal judges. And they were going to hold, it was announced their leadership was going to hold an emergency meeting about President Trump because I guess he dared to criticize the federal judiciary or particular judges, or dared to criticize the actions of the Justice Department. Now, by all accounts, it looked like this emergency meeting was going to be nothing more than a political meeting. And if that were the case, judges participating in that would be probably in violations of basic ethics norms that govern the federal judiciary. Yeah, they have ethics rules for the federal judiciary, as you might imagine. Well, someone got smart over there and supposedly they canceled the emergency meeting. The only emergency that our federal judges need to be worried about is that the FBI and the Justice Department use the judiciary to illegally spy on American citizens, and the judiciary has yet to do anything substantive about it. The only thing that's happened thus far is that the FBI has instituted new training, and the Justice Department is trying to figure out if there's any fruit of the poison tree they used that needs to be sequestered, meaning the illegal FISA warrants they used, if they gathered information, was that information used for other cases? Where is it? What is it? And they need to report to the courts on it soon. Nothing about criminal activity being pursued. The court, for instance, could hold these, the FBI, they could bring in the FBI and Justice Department and start holding people in criminal contempt. If I were running the Justice Department and I had found out this criminal activity took place in my agency, if I were running the FBI and I found out this criminal activity took place in my agency, I wouldn't have Durham out there doing a report. I don't know what Durham's doing. I'd be going to the court and say, you know what? It looks like there's some criminal activity that took place before your court. Tell us what you want us to do. We're putting our head on a block. Tell us what you want to do in terms of holding us accountable for this criminal activity, both as agencies and in terms of the individuals responsible within our agencies. But that's not what's happening. Instead, you hear talk of FISA reform. The best FISA reform would be to put people in jail who violated the law to spy on Trump and other innocent Americans, Carter Page specifically. And I tell you what, I read this Russia story, these Russia stories, I wonder if they're still spying on Trump. I don't know for a fact that's happening, but given the corruption endemic throughout the intelligence establishment targeting Trump, it wouldn't surprise me in the least. Wouldn't surprise me in the least. So as you know, Judicial Watch isn't just out there talking, I'm talking a little bit about this, but we've sued for the Stone records, specifically about the raid. Remember that outrageous raid early in the morning that somehow CNN was able to figure out was about to take place and they had cameras there? How did that happen? So we asked for records about their communications concerning the raid, and they've given us virtually nothing. It's interesting what the Justice Department gets outraged about. We've got the president's tweets it's outraged about, but the leak on the raid, they're covering up, or any information about the raid they're covering up. In the Stone case, for instance, we had information that a juror or jurors may have lied to get on the jury in Stone, and they were anti-Trumpers, and they may have lied about the scope and their specific knowledge of some of the issues involved here. I haven't heard the Justice Department complain about that yet. Instead, I heard them say that the Stone prosecution was a righteous prosecution. A righteous prosecution. Do you think it was righteous in light of all the facts and circumstances I've laid out for you? Well, this Justice Department thinks it is. They should be running away from these prosecutions. They should be freezing them. They should presume corruption, given everything that's going on. Instead, they're defending them and continuing to push them. The president's right to be frustrated.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.